The VVN Music Interviews are brought to you by VVN Music. Get the latest news on the veteran artists of rock, pop, soul, country, folk, and blues at vvnmusic.com. And by audible.com. Now you can get a free book download from their library of over 180,000 titles by going to audibletrial.com/VVN. Hi, and welcome to episode 51 of the VVN Music Interviews. I'm Roger Wink, and today we're going back to 2012 for an archive interview with Tommy Roe. Throughout the 60s and early 70s, Tommy Roe lit up the radio with some of the most infectious songs of the time. Starting with his Buddy Holly tribute, Sheila, in 1962, Roe had a string of hits that went through the entire decade, including Everybody, Sweet Pea, Hooray for Hazel, Dizzy, and Jam Up and Jelly Tight. Both Sheila and Dizzy topped the American charts, and he totaled 22 songs that made it to the Billboard Hot 100. At the time we talked with Tommy, he was working on a new album and was out on the road on a regular basis. I understand that you're recording and you're just about finished with a new album.
Almost finished with it. I have one more song to finish up, which I will start recording on April 2nd, and hopefully I can get it released by mid-April or at least latest end of April.
How are you going to go about releasing it? Are you going to go through iTunes or some other means?
Well, I want to definitely get it on the internet with iTunes and Amazon. All the download, the download market is what I'm shooting for, and so I'm trying to get the record business is so screwed up right now, and especially for somebody like myself who's really been out of the record business for a while. Trying to get a record deal is really incredible, and it's very difficult. And so if we don't succeed with that, I will probably just release it on my own and get an independent distributor to help me out with it, you know. In fact, I kind of like the whole idea of the independent thing because it's really, you have complete control of the project then. So, I mean, I like the idea of doing that. The main thing, though, is to get it on iTunes and Amazon and all the download programs, you know.
They're saying right now that digital is outselling the physical product, but the figures aren't quite showing that yet. Still, to get a CD distributed, it's tough because the main places where the CDs are sold now are places like Walmart, and they're cutting back so far on their inventory.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, they aren't selling like they used to. What's very interesting to me is, like, you know, I started in the business in the late 50s and during the 60s, of course, and our whole thing was selling a single record, you know, a 45 RPM record. Albums didn't really sell back then. You just went out, you tried to sell the record, and you tried to write a hit song. You tried to sell the song. Well, what's incredible to me is that it's come full circle. I mean, that's really what's happening now with downloads. People aren't downloading albums. They're downloading songs. And it's really, I think it's really a great thing because if you, like, being a songwriter, to me, the whole idea is to sell your song. And I think this download thing for songwriters is fantastic.
I read that the new album is almost all new material except for a cover and one where you dip back in time to re-record a song that was originally on an album of yours from the mid-'60s. How did you go about making those choices?
Kick Me Charlie is the song. And I get so many requests on the internet for Kick Me Charlie. Kick Me Charlie was on the Sweet Pea album in 1966, and it was supposed to be a single. It ended up being, I think it was a B-side on one of the records. I can't remember which one of the singles that ended up a B-side. And I have a lot of the fans that bought those records back then that love B-sides. They're kind of into B-sides, so they're always asking me about Kick Me Charlie. So I thought I would just do an updated version of it, and we went into the studio and recorded it. It really turned out fantastic. It has a lot of energy, you know, and the lyrics pop out. I mean, I really like the way it came out. So that's the only recut I have on the CD, and then the cover is a cover I did of Tim Hardin's song "If I Were a Carpenter."
What's the general feel of the album? I mean, are you going back to your rockabilly roots, or is it a wide swath of different genres?
I think it covers the different genres. But, you know, with me, I always, all of the songs I have written, and I don't write in any particular genre. So, I mean, there's three songs on there that are kind of country oriented. They don't. I mean, they're not real like fiddle country, but they're that kind of sound. And then like Kick Me Charlie to me is, I guess that could be country as well, but to me it's more of a pop record, you know. And so really what I do is when I write a song, I just record it the way I wrote it and I don't try to go for like a rockabilly sound or a rock sound or a country sound. I just do it the way I feel it. And however that comes out, that's how it comes out.
You know, all through your career, you've done that. I know you are a member of the Rockabilly Hall of Fame, and you started out in rockabilly with your group, the Satins. But then you take a look at your career, and there's a song like It's Now a Winter's Day, which has a nice soft sound to it. And, of course, then there were your big hits, which were more up-tempo.
Right. I started out as kind of a rockabilly. Well, Sheila was my tribute to Buddy Holly. I mean, that was the whole idea of that song. And then Everybody was really kind of my first real rockabilly recording. But I used to perform a lot of rockabilly stuff in my show when I was in high school and not just out of high school. But what happened after Everybody, I went into the Army for a short time. I was in the reserve, so I had to go do a stint in the Army. So I was kind of out of commission for about a year. And then when I got out of the Army, this whole British invasion thing started. I mean, you had all the British acts coming to America making records and releasing them in America. And they were like taking over the charts. You know, they pushed a lot of the American acts off the charts. So my whole idea was to try to survive this British thing. And, you know, I lived in England for a while when I first started touring over there. So I kind of had a feel for that music. And so my producer and I put our heads together and thought, well, you know, we got to find a niche that's not British, it's not American like the pop American rock acts, but we got to have to find something in between. So that's how we came up with that soft rock kind of bubblegum sound with Sweet Pea. That was my first attempt at that genre with Sweet Pea. And of course, Sweet Pea became a big record, and we kind of cracked that. I started that whole. They used to call me the king of bubblegum, you know. So I started that whole bubblegum thing during the '60s, and I really think, because I could write those songs, I think that's really what helped me survive with the so-called British invasion of the '60s, you know, because a lot of the American acts just disappeared from the charts, and I managed to hold my own.
In looking at your history, there are really kind of three distinct phases. You had hits around 62, 63, and then you go up to 66 with Sweet Pea and Hooray for Hazel.
Right.
And then there's another gap for Dizzy in 69.
That was Dizzy in 69. That Hooray for Hazel was also in there right after Sweet Pea, which is also, Hooray for Hazel kind of had the original recording of it has a kind of a British twang to it, you know. So I was walking the line there with bubblegum and British, so but it seemed to work for me. But again, if I hadn't been able to write those songs, I think I would have had a very difficult time having hit records, because being able to write your own music is really the key to the whole business. And it's so difficult to find hit songs, and a lot of times people don't want to give you a hit song if they think it's a hit. So the songwriting thing is really what helped me survive.
Did you have a lot of music that was recorded by other artists?
Well, they covered my hits. I mean, Dizzy's been recorded by a slew of people, and Sweet Pea was recorded by a lot of different artists. My favorite version of Sweet Pea is actually by pianist Roger Williams. He did a version of Sweet Pea, and it's almost a classical sounding record. You know, it's really incredible, which I really enjoy. It just shows how you can take a 3-chord song, and depend on how you want to arrange it, you can make it sound pretty incredible, you know. But he did a great version of Sweet Pea, and Dizzy, of course, was number one again, I think in the late '90s with Dick Reeves and the Wonder Stuff. They re-recorded it over there, and it became a big hit in England. And so, yeah, they're covered. The Ventures covered a lot of my records. You know, Sweet Pea and Dizzy they recorded, and so yeah, I never really had an artist come to me for a song. You know, usually, you know, I would create the hit and then I would get a cover on it.
You mentioned a simple 3-chord song, but one of the things I noticed in your music is that it's a lot more complex than what would be your run-of-the-mill record at the time. The best example, I guess, is Dizzy, which has 6, 8, maybe 10 key changes.
It's a very complicated song to play. I mean, sometimes with the band, I went to a New Year's Eve party this year, which I normally don't do, but it was a good friend I hadn't seen in a long time. So my wife and I went, and they had a band there, so I got up and sang with the band, and they wanted me to do Dizzy. So I said, okay, fine, we'll do Dizzy. Well, they couldn't play it. I mean, it was like I tried to tell them the chord changes, and the chord progression, but they just never got it. So I just did it with the guitar, because it's a very complicated song, and I wrote that with Freddie Weller, who was the lead guitar player with Paul Revere and the Raiders for a long time. And Freddie and I used to write songs on the bus as we toured around with Paul and boys. And so when I started writing this song, I actually dreamed the idea of Dizzy. I used to take a tape recorder around with me on the road, and you never know where a song idea is coming from. So I woke up one night with this melody and this thing in my mind, Dizzy, I'm so dizzy, my head is spinning. So I put it on the tape machine, and then I went on tour shortly after that with Freddie. Freddie was on the tour with us, and he and I finished the song. And I told Freddie, I said, look, Freddie, I've had a lot of success with my songwriting using modulations in the song, so we got to put a modulation in there. He says, well, why don't we do it on the first bar? I said, well, let's see what it sounds like. And sure enough, it was like D, G, B, and we're into the key of E already. So it really worked. It's a very clever song, and the progression gives it a lot of energy. So it worked real well for us.
In your early days, around the time of Sheila, did you do a lot of package tours, or were you out on your own?
Well, when Sheila became a hit, kind of an interesting story with that. I was working at General Electric, and Sheila was released once before on a local label in Atlanta, and it was kind of a local hit, So I met Felton Jarvis, and Felton wanted to record me, and he remembered Sheila, and he wanted to re-record it, but put the drums in there and make it different. So, we recorded, went to Nashville and recorded it and released it, and they played it around Atlanta. I thought, well, it's another hit around Atlanta, and I was working at General Electric. So the guy who produced the record, Bill Lowry, called me in the office. He called me at work one day. He said, come by the office. Said, it looks like Sheila's going to be a big record. And I thought, yeah, I know they're playing it on locally here. He said, no, it's bigger than that. So I went by the office, and he said, Sheila's like 40-something with a bullet in Billboard. I said, what is that? I didn't even know what that meant, So he laughed, and he explained, well, when it has a bullet, it means it's moving up the charts fast. So he suggested I consider quitting my job at General Electric, and I was just married and had a little baby, and I thought, oh, no way can I do that. I just landed this job, and I'm not about to quit the job because I feel secure there. I'm making like $80 a week or something. And he said, well, he laughed again. He said, well, look, yeah, I'll give you an advance against royalties, and maybe this will help change your mind. He wrote me a check for $10,000. Well, back then, $10,000 is probably like $50,000 or $60,000 today, and I didn't make $10,000 in the whole year, so I was shocked. So I went home with a check, talked it over with my parents, and they were amazed. And they thought, yeah, you're young, give it a try, see what happens. So, as we like to say, when there's nothing left to say, the rest is history. That changed my whole life right there. So. And Sheila went on up the charts, became a big hit. I started touring all around the Southeast. And the first tour I did was with Sam Cooke. And Chris Montez and I were on that tour together with Sam Cooke. And I think the Impressions were on there. I don't know. It was a lot of acts, rhythm and blues acts, from the South. And Smokey Robinson and the Miracles were on there. And that was my first big tour. So that was really an experience because I was such a fan of rhythm and blues music, so that's kind of how it started. And that's how I met Chris. And then, of course, later on, Chris and I were booked in England to do the tour over there together. And on that tour, there was a featured act that's called the Beatles.
You toured with the Beatles twice, right? Once in the UK and then once over here?
Yes, I did the tour in England, and Chris and I were the headliners of the tour, and the Beatles, this was probably their second tour. Nobody really knew who the Beatles were in 1963. Well, in England maybe, but not in America. Then, of course, when they became the Beatles, as we know the Beatles today, they came to the States, and they did the Ed Sullivan Show, and then right after that, they did the Washington Coliseum down in Washington, D.C. So Brian Epstein and I were talking about him managing me, so he called my producer there in Atlanta, Bill Lowry, and asked if I would open the show for them in Washington. So we did that, and so I had a good relationship with the boys.
How did the song Everybody come about?
I wrote Everybody after the tour in England with the Beatles, and Chris Montez and myself and the Beatles. You know, when I went to England, England was really still in the 50s musically, so the Beatles were doing a lot of rockabilly stuff. They were doing covers of 50s songs, like Gene Vincent and stuff like that. So I started hearing that music, and then in the States, you had, Frankie Avalon was having hits, and Fabian and, Bobby Rydell, these guys were having hits in the States, which was kind of pop rock, different kind of sound. So when I came back to the States, I took the Queen Elizabeth, the ship, back from London to New York City. And on the ship back to New York, I wrote Everybody. And it was really inspired by that tour because of the sounds I was hearing over in England, So when I got back to the States, I played it for Felton, and we went down to Muscle Shoals, Alabama. We recorded it there in Muscle Shoals, Alabama with Rick Hall, the engineer. And we recorded Everybody and released it, and it became a big record for me. And Everybody, I think, was probably the second hit recorded in Muscle Shoals. Arthur Alexander recorded You Better Move On, and I think that was the first hit that was recorded there. Then I came in and recorded the second hit, and then after that, everybody went to Muscle Shoals and started recording. They had a lot of hit records down there.
It's a really great song. It's one of those that seems so short, and you're always saying, what, it's over already?
Yeah, that's another interesting thing you mentioned, short, because that's another thing. Radio in the early 60s, they didn't want a record over 2 minutes. So when I would write a song, I would keep in my mind, I've got to keep it right at 2 minutes, 1:58, 1:59, something like that, because they love to come out of the news with songs like Everybody. They said, we can come out of the news with that because it's got a lot of energy. So that was another tactic I used as a songwriter, being a formula writer. That's what we were called, writing a 2.5 minute song. You try to tell a little story in 2.5 minutes. It's not that easy to do sometimes, but that was the whole process of writing songs. Part of it, was of course to write a hit, but you tried to keep it short. I think Everybody is about 1:59 or something like that.
Around 69 and 70, you had a resurgence after a couple of years where you didn't hit the top 10, and then you had another long string of hits.
Well, after Sweet Pea and Hooray for Hazel, those were my last big records. I tried that psycho pop stuff, kind of the psychedelic pop music. So I did 2 albums. I did an album called It's Now Winter's Day, which was based around the song I wrote called It's Now Winter's Day. And then I did another album called Fantasy. And both of those were produced by Kurt Betcher, who was kind of into that psychedelic pop sound. So we were experimenting during that period, and It's Now Winter's Day was released as a single, and it almost became a hit, but it turned out it's a winter song. I don't know if you're familiar with the song or not, but it's kind of a Christmassy, winter song, and it turned out to be a very warm winter, so the DJs stopped playing it. But they were playing it like crazy, like in December, and I thought, wow, this is going to be a big record. And then it got real warm, and so they kind of backed off playing the song. So it got in the I think it was like 30-something in the charts, and then it just stalled out. But so I was kind of experimenting with Kurt Betcher during that period, and then I got back to Steve Barry in 1969 to produce Dizzy, and we got back into the bubblegum sound.
Well, you had a really good run then right through the next year or two.
Right. Heather Honey came after Dizzy, which was a big record, and then Jam Up and Jelly Tight was another gold record for me, and Stagger Lee released a cover of Lloyd Price's song Stagger Lee, and that was also a big record. Then
you had an album in 1977, and then it wasn't until 2003 before you did another album. I recorded for Monument Records for a while there in the mid-'70s, and we did 2 albums, and then I recorded some songs for Warner Brothers. I kept switching labels. I got with Mike Curb. We did some things with Mike Curb, and then I released a record in, I think the last CD I released was the Mike Curb CD in the early 90s, and that was kind of a compilation of the hits and some new material. And I believe that was the last one released by a label, I know that you're semi-retired, but you're still going out on the road occasionally. I think you have 6 or 8 dates already scheduled for this year.
Yeah, I retired from the concert scene about 4 years ago, and my old band leader, Rick Levy, he was with me for years with our band and put our bands together and everything. He kept pushing me. He said, I'm getting a call from so-and-so about wanting to book you, and they're interested in booking you. And I just lost interest in traveling so much. So I backed off from doing dates. And then Rick kept pushing me and calling and said, got this idea here. So finally I said, okay, last year I'll do some dates. So we went to Canada. We did 3 dates up in Canada last year. And I really had a blast. I had a great time with Rick and the band. Got, traveling with my old buddies again. And the shows went well, and I'm doing a kind of a show on my own, an evening with Tommy Roe where I can talk with the audience. I kind of do a bit in the show where I go out in the audience and talk with the audience and just ask them what's on their mind and try to answer some trivia questions for them, whatever they want to talk about. So it went over really well. I had so much fun with the guys. I thought, well, let's see if we can do a few more dates this year. And so, he's got 8 or 9 dates booked already, and I think as long as I can keep it simple and not really start barnstorming again, I really don't want to go out there and do 90 to 100 dates a year. It's too much for me. But if I can pick and choose my dates and have fun with it, I think I'll continue doing it.
I understand, that your show is your hits and your story, but you also do quite a few covers.
I do, yes, I do. I do Lottie Miss Claudie, Lloyd Wright song, and I do Carpenter, of course, and I've been doing Carpenter in my show for years. And Chuck Berry stuff, and some of my favorite rock stuff from the 50s and 60s, kind of rockabilly stuff. And it's a full energy show, high energy show. Then I do an acoustic set in the middle where I do a couple of new songs and I do some B-side, stuff that kind of, off the wall stuff that people don't hear a lot of, but I get requests to do. So, and that's kind of a fun part of the show as well.
Any thoughts of recording some of the shows and putting an album together of that sometime in the future?
Maybe. We did record some, one of the shows at the Casino Rama in Canada. They recorded it. But I think we need to get a better, recording system, and it needs to be recorded to a better quality, But yeah, we might do that somewhere along the way. I wouldn't mind having a live show of my hits. That would be kind of a fun thing to do. So it's something that we've been talking about. Rick has brought it up several times. It's just a matter, I think, of putting the right tech people together to do it properly, to make it sound good.
Have you ever had any thoughts on possibly putting all your experiences down on paper?
I am thinking about that. I have written a little bit. It's so difficult for me to talk about my life. I don't know why it is, but to write it. But I can, like when I'm talking to you, I should record these sessions when I do interviews, because really that's what it's all about. I'm really talking about what I want to write about. And I'll need somebody to help me write it eventually. I probably can't do it on my own, but get a co-writer to help me put it together. But yeah, that's in the works. I've been thinking about it, working on it for a couple of years now, actually.
How about today's music? Is there anybody out there that really impresses you?
Well, I love Alison Krauss. I love, of course, I love Springsteen. I think he's just a real rocker, and I love the way he opened the show of the Grammy Awards this year. I think he was the best act on the show, because he really rocked out. And there's a few acts. I like to listen to college radio a lot, because you hear a lot of very interesting music there, and new stuff that doesn't get a lot of play on commercial radio, and you can sometimes hear some interesting songs. Being a songwriter, I like to hear what people are writing. So I listen to that kind of radio. But I would say those acts. I love Alison Krauss. I love her voice. She has a terrific voice.
Yeah, I've always said if angels are real, then they sound like Alison Krauss.
Just terrific. I went to a charity function this year for Ted Turner in Atlanta. He's a good friend of my wife and I. And we went to this function, and she was performing there that night. And we sat at Ted's table, and she was at the table with us. And I told her, I said, I bought her records before she was really a popular singer. I have really her original recording.
Way back in her teens when she started.
That's right. Yeah, when she first started. And I told her I was a big fan, and I was really excited about meeting her. And so she was terrific. And she performed, just her and I guess it's her husband, the guitar player. I'm not sure if they're married or not. They might just be friends. I'm not sure. But it was just the two of them. He played guitar, and she sang and played the violin and the fiddle, on a couple of songs. And it was terrific. I loved it,
The VVN Music Interviews can be heard via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play, Libsyn, and the VVN Music website. For the latest news on the veteran artists of rock, pop, soul, country, folk, and blues, go to vvnmusic.com. If you have any comments or questions about the website or this podcast, please send them to vvnnetwork@gmail.com. The VVN Music Podcast is a production of the VVN Network, copyright 2018.